can see here behind me the Bahá'í Centre of Learning building in Hobart. You can see the distinctive stainless steel clad dome, which kind of defines the auditorium. This is the main auditorium, so you can argue it's the most important room, it's the main meeting room, and it's the public face of the building. So we use the better quality materials here so that it has that lasting impact, and it's the first impression, it's the face of the building if you like.
I understand that this is the Bahá'í Centre for Learning, so can you tell us a bit about what the Bahá'í Centre for Learning is?
Well, I mean, we believe that we all should be learning, that we should have a culture of learning. We know that the world is changing rapidly, the environmental problems, other problems. We need a transition to a more united world society, and that means everybody needs to be learning new ways of living, new ways of relating to each other, new kinds of values. And so learning is really central to what Baha'is are doing, whether it be with children in children's classes, with young people just adopting values for their lives, with adults who can refer to spiritual truths as a way of reorienting their own lives and helping others and building a sense of community.
So lots of community building activities take place in this centre, yes. and I guess centres like it around the world.
Yes, there are many places. Sometimes it's just private homes, sometimes beautiful buildings like this, but the important thing is what goes on in them. Mm-hmm. And, it's the building of the communities that's the important part of it.
So here we are in the main auditorium of the Bahá'í Centre of Learning. Some of the features, obviously ample natural light. You can see the skylights above me. There's a 9-pointed star-shaped skylight. Now this means that the whole space receives natural light, probably 90% of the time throughout the whole year. These high-level windows open up automatically, and there's windows in the very top that open up. So we take advantage of the southwesterly breeze, so we can get natural convection in here, so the space doesn't need to be air-conditioned.
This is what we're concerned about, that bit of red on the left. The warming that began early last century and continues apace today is fuelled by a rate of carbon injection that dwarfs the natural processes of the PETM. The result is a rate of warming over 10 times that of the earlier thermal maximum, a warming which will cease only after we've stopped emitting greenhouse gases into the air. To repeat, science has found no other time within the past 100 million years where the whole planet has been subjected to such a massive injection of carbon over so short a period of time as is happening now.
One of the problems we face today is the world is changing very quickly. We cannot judge the future based on the past. And I think because we're going through this transition from many separate nation states to a single unified world society, we've already made much of that transition through our information technologies. You can pick up a cell phone and call about anybody on the planet today in some remote Indian village or in Central Africa. You can trade all over the world, you can invest all over the world. We're not yet letting people move all over the world. That's the missing part of globalization. We can't predict the future because it's something new and different. We can make scenarios about the future. And say, which of those visions would I like to have for myself? What kind of world would I like to live in? And then become ready for the changes that would take us to do that.
We have the tools to see the future, at least to paint a reasonably coherent picture of what the future might be like. We also have the tools to manipulate that future and see that if we make these choices against those choices, we can change what the future might look like. We don't have to wait until 55 million middle-class Americans suffer a disaster for us to be able to change the world.
This is the critical decade. This decade of the teens is really the decade where we have to start making major changes away from fossil fuels, away from a consumer society, towards a more balanced system for the future, and then we can build this new civilization on the foundations of the change that we make now. But this is the critical time. That's being future ready.
I've been studying sustainable development on the Baha'i Wilmette course, and I'm over here in lovely Tasmania to learn a lot more.
I'm really interested in climate change and what we can do about it to try to find a way forward for the future.
I'm interested in doing what I can to help with the environmental situation, make it better.
I'm very much interested in the climate change and what its impact that it's done on Kiribati.
We really have to start looking at how we're going to move from just thinking about these things into a more active role.
In case you've just joined us, this is Baha'i on Air, and we're actually at the Tasmanian Bahá'í Centre in Hobart. And we've got a special guest today, Professor Arthur Dahl from the International Environment Forum, and there's a conference this weekend at the Bahá'í Centre for the forum on ethics and the environment. You've touched on the Baha'i vision of this new world society. Can you tell me a bit more about that? That sounds really quite exciting.
Well, I mean, the Baha'i faith, founded in the middle of the 19th century, has always had a vision of the future. Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith, said that we were needed to go beyond the nations of the world. The nations need to have collective security, eliminate war, and begin to build a world society, a world civilization, an ever-advancing civilization, drawing on all the richness of people around the planet. And therefore we needed a civilization that had a balance of science and religion. That science gives us the tools to build this world civilization, the tools of communications, the tools of transportation, and so on. But it doesn't give us the values to live in that. And that's why we see we still have wars and other things. So we also need to bring in a faith-based dimension, a spiritual dimension. In fact, when I raised this issue of migrants in the United Nations, the Council on Human Rights had a social forum last year on climate change and human rights. And when I raised this issue of migrants and people receiving them, the Quakers said, we should have a meeting of all religions on the theology of the stranger. What do all of our faiths teach about how you welcome a guest into your home, into your community? How do you address the stranger in a positive way? Christ talked about this. And we need to build on those values to change our mentalities and prepare ourselves spiritually and morally for this future that is coming. That's being future ready.
And here we are again in the foyer of the Bahá'í Centre of Learning. This is the floor in the center here is all recycled jarrah. So this timber had a previous life when it was used in agricultural buildings in the mainland of Australia, and then it was repurposed. And you can see the inlay here in the floor, which is laser cut stainless steel, and inlaid into this stainless steel are a little display of some of the specialty Tasmanian timbers.
2 years ago, in preparation for the Copenhagen meeting on climate, which I went to for the Baha'i community, the UN Development Program invited all the religions to prepare their own action plans on climate change. And so they all got to work. We had a big ceremony at Windsor Castle with Prince Philip and Ban Ki-moon, Secretary of the United Nations, to celebrate the presentation of these action plans. I was there for the Baha'i community, along with representatives of all of the major religions, to present these action plans. And the Baha'is committed to integrate issues of climate change and the environment into their core educational activities in their communities around the world over the coming years, so that we will educate Baha'is in their children's classes, in their youth activities, in their community activities, even in when they pray and gather together to think spiritually about these things, to say we have a responsibility to respond to these challenges. It's not only a physical challenge, a question of our physical survival, also a question of our spiritual growth and development to achieve sustainability.
What I found really important in this conference was it had such a great emphasis on community building and really having that process of action and reflection. You sort of have these ideas and you understand the information around you, but how do you actually practically resolve those issues?
One thing that's really struck me is that there are many people working in the science and intellectual aspects of climate change and so on. But there are fewer people working in the area of our ethical responsibilities and our spiritual responsibilities for doing something about how humans impact the global environment.
There's been a few things that are enlightening, the ideas from people who have been around in this sort of field for a long time and what needs to happen, and knowing that things that happened 10, 20 years ago are what are affecting us now, and that what we do now will affect 10, 20 years into the future, that nothing's happening right now per se, that it's all a linear process, I guess, you know, that everything affects each other, but it affects it further than we can comprehend.
There's another point on here that's in the program that says being engaged whilst avoiding partisan politics. Now, is it Baha'is that are meant to avoid partisan politics? Is that what it's about? And why?
Yes, well, Baha'is are very involved in these issues. We're very concerned about the changes in society. The problem with partisan politics, wherever it is in the world, is that it's based on division. One party fighting against another to win the election. And that's a very negative thing, because it means half the population is trying to govern, the other half is trying to make them fail so they can take over. It's no wonder it doesn't always work very well.
And it's not that Baha'is are indifferent to issues of public concern, far from it. But given the high value that our faith places on unity, we do have serious reservations about a political system that is essentially grounded in division rather than bringing people together. So maybe the real question is how to get partisan politics out of our processes of governance. And perhaps the climate crisis is offering us an opportunity to look anew at how our society makes decisions about important issues. And surely in the 21st century, in a country with record levels of education and resources at our disposal, we can move beyond partisanship to develop processes of decision-making that are more inclusive, unifying, non-competitive, collaborative, and mutually empowering.